Hello, everyone. We're very pleased today to welcome you to an Open University Economics seminar on the Welsh Basic Income pilot. I'm Rajiv Prabhakar, a senior lecturer in the Economics Department, and I'm very pleased to chair today's event on the Welsh Basic Income. We're delighted to have two very distinguished speakers to join us today. The First Minister, Mark Drakeford, and the Minister for Social Justice, Jane Hutt. They'll be presenting on the Basic Income pilot. Before we start, a few words about the actual seminar series. The OU Open University Economics Seminar Series aims to bring together academics, policymakers, activists and practitioners to talk about real-world economics issues. And obviously, we're thrilled to have both ministers here to speak to us today. We started this series to show what Open University Economics is about how we've got a pluralist approach, and we bring together a diverse range of expertise. Information about past and future events from the series can be accessed via the website, and I think someone's going to post that in the chat box. And obviously, you can keep track of us through our social media on OU Economics Twitter handle @economics_OU. This particular seminar is also being run in conjunction with OU Wales. This reflects the unique status of the Open University as having a presence in all the nations, and so this particular series is being run in partnership with OU Wales, and towards the end we've got the Open University Director for Wales to make a few comments. So now to our speakers. Mark Drakeford. Mark Drakeford is a former probation officer, youth justice worker, and has been Professor of Social Policy and Applied Social Sciences at Cardiff University. Mark became the Assembly member for Cardiff West in May 2011 and has had a range of ministerial posts since being elected. In December 2018, he was appointed First Minister of Wales, and in 2019, a member of the Privy Council. And Mark was appointed First Minister on the 13th of May 2021. If I may, I might give a slight personal reflection here. I first met Mark about in 2010, just before he was elected to the Welsh Parliament, and we gave a seminar together in Washington DC on the Child Trust Fund. And I remember at the time talking to Mark about his plans as he was standing for election. Since then, I've kind of ploughed my way through the Open University. Mark got elected, got a ministerial post, became First Minister. And so there's been a lot of overachievement since that particular seminar, right? And I'm thrilled that we're talking. Also, just to bookend that, Mark was the kind of star of that show in that particular seminar, and it was on the Child Trust Fund. And it's something I'll pick up a bit later when I make some remarks to Minister Jane. Minister Jane Hutt is the Minister for Social Justice. She was first elected to the Assembly in 1999 and has had a range of ministerial posts, including the Minister for Health and Social Services, the Minister for Children, Education, Lifelong Learning and Skills, Leader of the House, Deputy Minister, Chief Whip, and Jane was appointed Minister for Social Justice on the 13th of May 2021. Just on the format, what I'm going to do is I'm going to hand over to the First Minister and then the Minister, and they're going to talk about the Welsh Basic Income pilot. I will then offer some brief responses and questions to both First Minister and Minister, and then we're going to maximise time for questions from the audience. Following that, once that is complete, and if you want to write any questions, you're welcome to write in either Welsh or English. There'll be some closing remarks from Louise Casella, who's the OU Director for Wales, and then I'll bring the meeting to a close promptly by 1 o'clock. Okay, So, with no further ado, I'm going to hand over to the First Minister.
Wel, Raj, prynawn da. Diolch yn fawr am y cyflwyniad mor caredig. Mae'n pleser mawr i cael y cyfle i cydweithio da ti unwaith eto, ond hefyd i cyflwyno y syniad radical ni wedi bod yn datblygu yma yn y Llywodraeth yn Cymru, sef incwm sylfaenol i bobl sydd wedi bod mewn gofal yma yn Cymru. Dwi'n mynd i cyfrannu yn Saesneg ar y cyfan, ond wrth gwrs, pleser i trial i ateb cwestiynau yn Gymraeg hefyd. Raj, I'll make most of my contribution in English, but very happy to take questions, of course. The commitment to a basic income pilot was included in the manifesto that Jane and I both stood up on at the elections here in Wales in May of last year. We said as a party that we would put an ambitious and radical programme in front of people in Wales. And this strand in it is very much at that end of the programme for government that we are committed to pursuing. It draws on a series of different strands that reach back into the history of devolved government here in Wales. And here are briefly just 4 of those strands. First of all, from the very start of devolution, successive governments, we're now in our 6th term, but over each term, governments have added to the repertoire of actions we take to allow more money to stay in the pockets of Welsh citizens by providing collectively for some of those shared needs. So in the very first Senedd term, an early action was to make access to museums and galleries in Wales free for everybody. When the Assembly was elected, you were charged to go into our museums and galleries. And there will be many, many families over this very difficult Christmas period who will be able to make a visit to our national museums as part of the way in which they are able to do interesting, useful things, keep children entertained, and at no cost to themselves. And we built on that repertoire in every single Senedd term, whether that's free prescriptions, whether it's free breakfast in primary schools, whether it's our childcare offer, whether it's our approach to student support, keeping educational maintenance allowances. All of these are things that leave money in people's pockets, but otherwise they would have to spend on buying goods and services. As well as boosting incomes, we have been interested in asset-based welfare. The way you heard Raj say, we worked to boost the child trust funds of looked after children here in Wales, putting additional money into those trust funds so that when those young people became 18, they would have a sum of money behind them to, as we would have said, change the way that they were able to see the world. Our basic income pilot for care leavers has some of those same characteristics, and I'll say a tiny bit about that in a moment. In a third strand, we've also been guided by the notion of progressive universalism, the idea that public services are best provided when everybody has a stake in them. They're not services reserved for the poor, they're services that the articulate, the well-informed, have an equal interest in making as good as they can be. But then we add on top of that an additional increment for those whose needs are greatest. So in our schools, we have a sum of money that every pupil has in order to enhance their education. But then for children whose needs are greatest, that sum of money is topped up so that there is a progressive aspect of universalism. And that's true in this scheme as well. We will be spending, local authorities will be spending millions of pounds on children who come within the ambit of their social services departments. For children who are looked after, the children who have the greatest intervention in their lives, this is a progressive addition beyond what the system would be expending on them in any case. And then finally, the scheme draws on a very powerful strand in the whole of devolution, which is a focus on the rights of children. The Assembly very early on adopted into our law the UNCRC, and our approach to services for young people, engagement with young people, is absolutely founded on the notion that young people have rights, and that the relationship with government is one in which we try to do our best to enable them to realise those rights in practice. They're not rights that live on the page, they're rights that make a difference in the lives of those young people. And the way we have tried to design the basic income pilot is rooted in that sense of our young people as Welsh citizens with rights that come to them as part of that citizenship. So the scheme is designed with trust, autonomy and respect at the heart of the way in which we think about it. And our hope is, but it's a pilot, and the pilot is designed to test these things. Our hope is that care leavers who have lived some of the most challenging lives in Wales, and for whom the normal expectations are often pretty bleak, are providing them all with a basic income set at the level of the real living wage, that will enable those young people to make decisions which are investment decisions about their own futures. And that's where asset-based welfare and all of those ideas comes in to all this. Far, far too many of our young care leavers are forced into making short-term decisions. You take a job, not because it's the right job for you, not because it's the job you want to do, but you're desperate for money, you must take the first job that comes your way. You end up living somewhere, not because it's the place that you would choose for yourself, but because you're desperate to find somewhere to live. What we hope is that young people with an income sufficient to meet their needs, is that they will be able to make decisions that are not about the immediate short-term survival, but about longer-term investment in the futures they would want to see for themselves. Putting down a deposit on a flat, buying a car that allows you to travel to a job, going on a course that you wouldn't be able to go on if you were having to work here and now in order to survive. And that's what our pilot will test, and that is what the evaluation will test. Does having an income of this sort change people's long-term prospects for the better? And if it does, of course, then it will be an investment in the lives of those young people, but it'll be an investment in the public purse as well. Because by putting the investment up front, we will avoid those huge costs that come with systems that have to bear the consequences of failure. The justice system, mental health system, homelessness systems, all of those things that end up picking up young care leavers when things have gone badly wrong in their lives. So we will be testing that as part of our proposition as well. Jane will tell you more about the way in which the system has been designed. We have to design it in the devolved context. We can't have a universal basic income. We simply couldn't afford it. And an awful lot of the money that we would invest in it would end up back in Whitehall through taxes and reduced benefits and so on. It is universal for all care leavers. So in that sense, every single person in that particular group is included, and the early take-up figures are exceeding our expectations, which is great. So we have to design it within the powers that we have, the scope that we have. But it's a very significant pilot. Over 500 young people will take part. It'll last over 2 full years. It's unconditional in the money that it provides. Each participant receives the same. The money is guaranteed over the whole of the period. And we believe that we will learn a great deal through doing it. And along the way, as a minimum, we'll have done some good in the lives of some of the most disadvantaged young people we have in Wales. I'll pass over to Jane for, because Jane has been involved in the actual design and delivery of it.
Well, diolch yn fawr. Thank you very much, First Minister, and Prynhawn Da. Great to meet you, Haraj. I don't think we've met before, but great, fantastic to be involved in this seminar with Mark. And yes, it is, I'm Minister for Social Justice, so what could you, imagine to be a better job and more important job at this really challenging time, but at any time, in bringing together all those strands of social justice that the First Minister has identified, which has really driven us since those early days of devolution, but particularly, I think, the commitment to children's rights being at the forefront of our agenda. So just want to say a bit about how we developed the pilot. I mean, clearly we developed the pilot, the basic income for care leavers in Wales. We developed with those who are already involved in working with care leavers, and those are people in local authorities, the professionals in local authorities, many in the third sector, many of our organisations that work with children as well. And of course, those who have worked with them at that very critical time of transition, which, because this is about a pilot which will be limited to care leavers who are reaching their 18th birthday, such an important transition for all young people in their lives. But critically important is that we wanted to involve care experienced young people from the outset. We wanted their views. We wanted them to help us shape this pilot, and I think that's been one of the most important aspects of the learning, that we're involved in an organisation called Voices from Care, which is led by care experienced people, and crucially important over the last 25 years. I mean, in fact, what the chief executive of Voices from Care was one of the people who influenced us when we set up the first we appointed the first independent children's commissioner for Wales following the Waterhouse review. And, there's some strength and continuity about our engagement as a government with those at the forefront of lived experience in how we shape our policy. So we involved the voices of looked after children through the developmental phase. In fact, I think Mark and I probably were both down meeting with Voices from Care Cymru at a very early stage to say, to see how we could engage with them. I think what's very interesting is that right from the outset of meeting care experienced young people, those who might at the age where they might benefit from those, but those who are already older young people, care experienced young people who play a part in trying to shape policy and support care experienced young people. And they just said, "God, are you really thinking of doing something like this with us? This is about bringing confidence and respect to children's rights." And it was just very powerful to actually say, well, yes, we believe in you, we trust in you. We're providing this opportunity, but how can we get it right? How can we do it best? We hope it to be supportive but transformational. So many issues came up at those early meetings, safeguarding issues, also, how payments could be made, and also questions about, well, can we get some help, in budgeting? And just to explain that every young person in this cohort receives a basic income pilot of £1,600 per month before tax for a duration of 24 months from the month after their 18th birthday. It is in line, it's unconditional, it is in line with the real living wage. And that's, that's the importance. And actually, it is a big commitment, in our budget, isn't it, Mark? It's a big commitment in my budget that we should invest in this way. But we know that it is an investment for the future. Well, we wanted to go right from the start to get the advice and guidance from those been involved in basic income and universal basic income across the world, but also those involved at the forefront in terms of tackling poverty, because this is about a real opportunity to actually transform the opportunities for those young people. We established a technical advisory group, which is chaired by Professor Sir Michael Marmot, and brought together experts, Guy Standing, SOAS, experts on basic income, but also experts on looked after children. So we made sure that we've got, Welsh-based organisations, but also crucially important people and academics and advisors from outside of Wales, and then looked at international examples as well. We needed a critical friend role for the evaluation, and I'm glad to say that the evaluation now has been awarded to Cascade at Cardiff University. Just people from across the world wanted to meet us when they heard we were thinking about this, but we also wanted to learn from them, looking at how the basic income approach has been developed. So that includes contacts with people from Ontario, Finland, Santa Clara and Catalonia. And Santa Clara scheme is for care leavers, so in their county. So there's a close connection there to our proposal. I think what was important when we met our young people and those who are working with and supporting care experienced young people, this wasn't just about the money. It wasn't just about supplying the money to beneficiaries. It was actually about inform, well, what do we do with the money and what does this mean for us? And again, back to the point about financial advice, budgeting, and support for care leavers taking part. Now, all our care leavers, obviously at that stage, also have personal young people's advisors who work very closely with them. So, I mean, this was about, understanding what would be appropriate, but very independent advice. So we actually have developed this service around the advice, which can actually support our young people, and I think they're finding it really helpful. But it's also not just direct advice to young people, but as I say, second tier advice to their advisors as well. So as the First Minister said, we've got a very good take. Approximately 96% of eligible young people have signed up to the pilot. Now, of course, any pilot like this, there are going to be teething problems, and actually learning at the very early stages about making sure that we get it right from the ones who are actually at the start of the pilot. And they were so good with us, being very honest and straight as we met with them and all the teams working on this to find out, well, are there any issues? I mean, we have had a good deal of sadly, the UK benefit system, of course, and its interaction with the basic income pilot has been quite difficult, because we worked hard to try and get we didn't want this to be in terms of tax and benefits. We wanted this is to be set aside, but actually, unfortunately, HMRC and DWP confirmed at an early stage that the gross payment amount of £1,600 would interact with tax and benefits and recognised as income. It was very disappointing. I mean, that's why it was so important that we had that sum, the £1,600, was based on the real living wage. But the interactions that we work with, we provide that kind of support, independent support to young people. Now, just finally, for me, I think this is very much cross-government responsibility. Obviously, as lead minister for social justice, but my colleague Julie Morgan, who is Deputy Minister for Social Services, of course, she's responsible for children and young people's services in Wales, and very much engaging with care experienced young people as well. And recently we had a brilliant summit only a couple of weeks ago with care experienced young people from across Wales, organised by Voices for Care Cymru. And, you know, we heard a lot more from young people about their hopes and dreams for the future and how we could actually learn from a great deal about the care system in Wales anyway. But Julie and I met with a group of young people who joined the pilot just a few months ago. It started in July of this year to discuss their experiences. And it was, I mean, it just filled one with great hope and admiration for these young people. They had their questions, and I learned about teething troubles, and we were there to address that. But also we heard about what they want to do with this money. And there's some inspiring young people. And, you know, it did extend, as Mark said, from everything to be able to, you know, just get into the house, you know, into housing, let alone the housing market. But, you know, to get into private rented sector is challenging in itself. But also driving lessons came up a lot. Actually, you know, Wales is a huge rural area, and I think that was particularly, we met them in North Wales, and we could see that access to transport, which of course is about freedom for them. But I mean, and one young person saying that she was actually going to save her money to set up a business, and she was going to go to uni to get the skills and run her and set up her own business. And then others talking about how they saw this as part of their wider responsibilities with family members and people that they cared about in their lives. So, you know, these are examples about young people taking responsibility as a result of this basic income pilot. We look forward to the evaluation and the ongoing engagement with young people, lessons to be learned along the way, but a real transformation of the expectations that they might have of not just themselves and their opportunities, but, you know, how government can be on their side, we hope.
That's fantastic. What a fantastic set of presentations from the First Minister and Minister. That's brilliant. First Minister, you've written previously about the importance of the Welsh context for social justice and the devolution context for innovative public policy. I just wonder if you'd make a remark or two about how that Welsh social justice context and Welsh devolution context fuels the kind of innovation and choice of pilots such as these.
Raj, thank you very much. Well, look, in terms of the specific pilot, the devolution settlement is an asset, but also has its real limitations. Jane touched on a bit of this. The asset of the devolution settlement is that it does enable us to mount a pilot of this sort. We have made a conscious decision to find over £20 million from our budget to support it, and the devolution settlement allows us to do that. So, you know, in that sense of living laboratory policy experimentation, this is something we are now able to do in Wales that we wouldn't have been able to do without devolution being here. The limitations are when these things touch on non-devolved responsibilities. And, you know, Jane is right, we were very disappointed that we were unable to persuade the DWP and then through them HMRC to be part of this experiment with us. Quite a lot of that £20 million now ends up in a direct transfer out of the Welsh budget back into budgets in Whitehall, either through taxation or by welfare payments not being made. There was an opportunity here for a combined experiment. And as I say, you know, one of our hopes for the experiment is that in the end it saves money for government, and the UK government could have been part of finding out whether that was the case. So the settlement helps us, but it also places limitations on what we can do. The broader context is that Wales goes on being a country where collective solutions to common problems strikes a chord with the way in which people in Wales think about their own futures. We have been able to mount an experiment of this sort without any of the awful reactions you might have expected from a sort of Daily Mail type, commentariat. People in Wales, I think, would regard young people in the care system as young people that we do need to invest in. They don't regard them as the undeserving poor, where taxpayers' money is now being frittered away on them. No doubt there are people in Wales who do believe that, but the bulk of Welsh opinion will be supportive of the sort of initiative we've taken. And in that sense, the Welsh context does enable us to mount experiments of this sort that would be more challenging in other places where you can't draw on that same sort of history of radical action, which has been part of our history here in Wales.
That's a brilliant answer. Thank you, First Minister. Minister, I just want to pick up on something, a quick question to do with progressive universalism. This has been a kind of thread. You mentioned progressive universalism. It's kind of been a thread that kind of connects policies for young people, and also various initiatives towards care experienced young people. So, for example, in that kind of seminar that Mark and myself did back in Washington, DC, we talked about the Child Trust Fund, and Wales was one of the reasons why I asked Mark to come over. Was Wales had a Welsh top up to the Child Trust Fund. This was a policy of a UK government policy providing all young children with a £250 seed endowment, £500 for children from low income families. But Wales went beyond that and had their own top up. And so this is actually a continuous thread. And it's interesting what you were saying, Minister, about driving lessons, because some of the work I did at the time was one of the issues at the time with the Child Trust Fund was how would people spend their money? And there was always concern that what is called stake blowing, people would just fritter the money away. But young people at the time said driving lessons, they'd actually use it for driving lessons, which is interesting to see you pick that up. What I'll do quickly is to ask the sort of pressures you placed in for the current cost of living pressures in executing this pilot. Just any thoughts about how that affected or impacted this pilot? And then after this, I'll move to questions.
Well, thank you very much. There was quite a lot of questions there, really, Raj, which I'll different aspects of it, which are really interesting, and perhaps will come out in questions, because I think the sort of progressive universalism has been about how we've tried to also tackle poverty and to ensure that we can reach out to as many people as possible. So actually, one of our recent decisions that we've taken, actually in cooperation with it, we have a cooperation agreement with Plaid Cymru over a number of particularly social, environmental and economic policies. And one of them was to roll out universal free school meals for primary school children, which is just so important in terms of tackling the cost of living crisis, but also that we're actually going to go for the universal free school meals. So it's universal meals programme for primary school children, removing the stigma. But actually, we've had free school meals, which was also not means tested, but actually enabling all children universally and I think it's been transformational, hasn't it, Mark? The fact that all children are now eating together on the same basis, and it's crucial in terms of tackling cost of living, in terms of cost of living as well. I mean, I suppose we've just this week presented, the Finance Minister presented our draft budget, the hardest budget since devolution, and really difficult decisions. We've all had to look at reprioritising our own commitments because we needed to make sure we had some room for manoeuvre in terms of social justice, health, the health service, obviously education. But actually, what was so important is that this basic income pilot was protected. We protected it. I protected it in my budget, and with absolutely the backing of the whole government. And indeed, 2/3 of our Senate, of our Welsh Parliament, are in the same place on this. So I won't mention the third. You can imagine who they are. But the two-thirds who recognise how important this is going to be, because it also just links to the fact that this week our Economy Minister, Vaughan Gethin, made a statement about our young people's guarantee, which is 18 to 25-year-olds. You either get a job, an apprenticeship, and help to set up a business, or further or higher education. Now, I mean, not so care experienced young people often just didn't even sort of get to engage with some of these important initiatives. You remember Jobs Growth Wales. They now see that with this income, they can consider an apprenticeship, perhaps a job opportunity, and indeed further and higher education. Where, and for so many young people at 18 who aren't leaving care with their families, who, obviously are supporting them all the way through this important part of transition into adulthood. They now know we're here for them.
Brilliant. What I'll do, because I'm conscious I'm kind of overstepping my time here, and I'll go to a few questions in the chat box now. I'll try to get as many of those as I can. So we have a question that was posted in Welsh, and it's from Owen, and it says, Hi, First Minister, do you have any thoughts on the kind of leadership that's needed to see through bold action on issues like the UBI care leaver support in the face of hostility from very vested interests? We may need to learn from examples like yours. And just one thing, just before you answer that, we've had a comment from someone called Charlotte, who said, I've been in care and I am so glad that this is around, because this would have really benefited someone like Charlotte. So in answer to the question from Owen then about the kind of leadership to see these sort of policies do, any reflections?
Wel, os dwi'n ateb yn Gymraeg i'r cwestiwn, a diolch i Charlotte am beth wedodd hi, y pwynt pwysig dwi'n meddwl yw y pwynt mae Jane wedi wneud yn barod. I wneud pethau radical, mae'n pwysig i trial i creu cytundeb sy'n mwy nag un plaid. Ond chi'n eisiau trial i wneud pethau newydd, i dibynnu just ar dim ond 30 mas o 60 o bobl yn y Senedd sy'n yn y blaid ni, ac i trial i wneud rhywbeth fel hyn, mae'n anodd i wneud os chi'n just dibynnu ar just aelodau Plaid Lafur. So dyna pam ni wedi creu cytundeb gyda Plaid Cymru a gyda Jane Dodds, yr unig person yn y Senedd ar hyn o bryd sy'n dod o'r cefndir y Lib Dems. Trwy cydweithio dy gilydd, ni'n gallu creu llwyfan, be ni'n gallu symud ymlaen gyda pethau sy'n newydd, sy'n radical, be mae rai bobl ddim yn cytuno. A mae hwnna wedi bod rhan o'r hanes ni trwy cyfnod datganoli i gyd. Mae Plaid Lafur wedi bod mewn grym ers cychwyn datganoli, ond dyn ni ddim mewn un etholiad wedi ennill mwyafrif o serie. Rhaid i ni cydweithio gyda bobl eraill, pobl gyda syniadau blaengar fel hyn, ac os ni'n siarad am arweiniaeth yn y profiad fi, a dwi'n gwybod mae Jane wedi bod rhan o hwnna hefyd, cydweithio gyda bobl eraill yw allweddol i symud syniadau ymlaen.
Thank you very much. I'll follow up with a couple more questions. We've got a question in the chat box from Mark. As a long-term supporter of basic income, I'm interested to know in how we share the trial with international practitioners and engage with people who are interested internationally. Have you any quick thoughts on that?
Well, thanks very much. Yes, really interesting. As I said, in my contribution, we were learning internationally anyway as we developed the pilot. These colleagues across the world. I think I mentioned the Santa Clara's scheme that was for care leavers, which was particularly interesting. Actually, Mark and I think we had a virtual meeting with colleagues from Catalonia. I've also got a lot of interest in Ireland. The Republic of Ireland met with Children's Minister from there as well. But basically, we're very fortunate that Guy Standing, who has done work globally on UBI. I think when we met with him, first of all, he said he'd been involved in actually every pilot. He wants to move from pilots into this being embraced by governments as policy. So we're certainly, this is a global learning. People are very interested in what we're doing. I think, Mark, you did an interview with the New York Times last week, as well as many others. But also, can I say that this is where we have a lot of interest about other ways in which we could pilot basic income, and a lot of challenge. I mean, as Mark said, we couldn't do a universal basic income geographically. People have asked us to do look at other ways. Well, this is a very bespoke basic income pilot with many of the and the commitment of people like having Michael Marmot and Professor Guy Standing. And actually, I think there's a conference going on, as we speak, in Cardiff University, in Wales Centre for Public Policy, about how this is going to be, acknowledged, and we can learn from it as we go through. But I think our young people as well. Obviously, you don't want to overload them with, having to recognise that they're being looked at from what they're doing from across the world. But they are going to be so influential in terms of the evaluation, their feedback and monitoring throughout, but their learning will be shared very widely.
There's been a couple of questions, forgive me, in the chat box. I've kind of amalgamated a few of them. Interested in the kind of budgeting advice or financial advice that those people in the pilot, what sort of budgeting of financial advice will be part of the pilot? If I guess the Minister or First Minister, anything want to say on that?
Yes, well, we sought independent advice. In fact, Citizens Advice are providing that service, and so that's sort of cascaded because it's across the whole of Wales for all our young people. Very much shaping this, being very open in terms of the kind of advice that they would need. I mean, some of this is the advice that everybody needs who are in that transitional period, making sure they're entitled, getting all the entitlements. And certainly that also might include educational entitlements, job-related entitlements. But then it's also just about managing money. We had quite a lot of discussions about how young people would want to receive their payment, because this was raised a lot, whether it to 2 months, for example, twice a month rather than monthly, and also this issue about direct payments to landlords as well, which actually can be very helpful, but it's a choice. That's where, again, the young person's voice and consideration. But then you need to talk to people independently, get that financial advice to make those decisions. I noticed on the chat that someone had mentioned money advice services, and I think everybody in Wales knows about this now. So at a local level, and even job centres actually are very interested in what we're doing. DWP might be involved, of course, if things go with Gordon Brown's way. But I just think that this is we may actually change some of this when we get feedback. They might need something more specific, but it is very much focused around rights and entitlement.
Thank you, Louise. If you forgive me, people in the chat box. We've only got a limited time, so I'm going to move straight now to a few remarks from Louisa Casella. She's the Director of the OU in Wales and was a member of the Welsh Assembly Government Review of Higher Education in 2008 and twice served as an elected member of the CBI Wales Council. Over to you, Louise.
Fernanda, pawb. Good afternoon, everyone, a diolch, Rajiv. Gyntaf, ar ran y Prifysgol Agored yng Nghymru, gai diolch i'r Prif Weinidog a'r Weinidog Cyfiawnder.
Dwi ddim yn gallu clywed ti, Louise.
Ac yn gymryd rhan yn y seminar hwn. We're all very grateful to you for your time and for sharing this innovative project and your thoughtful contributions. I know we have a range of colleagues and students from across the Open University in today's audience, as well as a number of partners and stakeholders from other organisations and communities across Wales and more widely. Thank you all for supporting the seminar, which I hope you'll agree has provided an excellent opportunity to hear directly from the First Minister and the Minister for Social Justice, to question them and to discuss with them, and to learn more about the Welsh Government's innovative basic income pilot. As I expect the First Minister and the Social Justice Minister know all too well, people will always have a range of opinions about policy innovations such as this. Of course, it's quite proper that they should have the opportunity to debate them and to hold our policymakers to account. Ond, yn fwy na hynny, yr hyn y mae polisi hwn yn ei ddangos yw fod gennym ni ffordd gwahanol o wneud pethau yng Nghymru, a'n bod yn digon dewr i fentro i dir newydd. The ultimate goal of all of us is to rid our society of the stain of poverty and to ensure that everyone in Wales has the opportunity to expand their horizons, to reach their potential and to live fulfilled lives. That is the raison d'etre of the Open University, of course. For over half a century, our mission has been to make higher education open to everyone, regardless of their background or circumstances. Mae'n model hyblyg yn golygu bod ni yn opsiwn arbennig o dda i pobl sydd ag lot o'r ymrwymiadau a chyfodolebau, ychwanegol yn eu bywydau i hwnt i ddysgu. So, for example, many of our students are in full-time work alongside their studies, many are raising families, and many are providing unpaid care to friends or family. Carers will often say to look after a loved one is a privilege. It's something they're proud to do, but that does not negate the fact that it's also immensely challenging and often comes at a significant cost to the carer. Equally, we know those who have experience of care face enormous barriers in accessing opportunities and having their voices heard and their identities and experiences recognised and in reaching their own potential. What we want to do is put higher education back within the grasp of carers and care leavers alike. That's why, on top of the flexibility we also offer a carers bursary and a care experience bursary, and we were the first university to introduce a carers scholarship fund. These are things we're proud to offer because we recognise the barriers experienced. And accessing higher education for those coming out of care or those caring, the barriers to that are no different to the barriers elsewhere in life. They deserve that opportunity to experience higher education as much as anyone else, and we're proud to be playing our part. So finally, let me thank my Open University colleagues, particularly our host for today, Rajiv Prakpa, ac unwaith eto, diolch o galon i'r Prif Weinidog Mark Drakeford a'r Gweinidog Cyflawnder Cymdeithasol Jane Hunt yn ymuno heddiw am eich cyfraniadau. And let me close by wishing one and all a very Merry Christmas, however you choose to mark it, and a very happy, healthy and prosperous new year ahead.
Okay.
Diolch.
Thank you, Louise. So I'm now going to bring this meeting to a close. But just before I bring the meeting to a close, just a couple of thank yous. Doing any event like this is a team effort and it involves a lot of people. And so I'd like to say a couple of thank yous. First to the Open University and also to the Welsh Government. For the Open University, there's lots of people who I have to thank, but I'll just whittle it down to two basic strands. First, in the OU Economics, I have to thank Christina Lascaridis, who has helped me organise this seminar, and she's been fantastic in dealing with my very many emails about this in the run up to the event. Sheila Hobbs as well, the discipline secretary, has been brilliant. I've learned more about teams than I think anyone needs to know from her involvement. From OU Wales, I have to thank Kerith Rhys-Jones and Rodri Davis. They've been brilliant in ensuring that the Welsh angle has been properly covered and catered for. For example, setting up the live translation and helping me navigate the process. So a big, massive thumbs up from me to OU Wales. And my final set of thanks to the Welsh Government. The diary secretaries for the First Ministers have been brilliant. Laura, Sean, Mark. And in the press office, Gwydno, they've been fantastic in dealing with it. But most of all, I have to thank the First Minister and Minister for being so generous with their time. It's so much appreciated. Thank you all very much for what has been an absolutely fantastic seminar. Thank you.